Some of the deepest suffering in human experience began when we were taught to divide what God created as whole. Sacred sensuality, sexuality, and spirituality is, in my opinion, the Divine Trinity rooted in the embodiment of love. Greetings, high vibrational beings. Love breathes conscious design where emotion is made whole. What if I told you that one of the deepest wounds in the human experience is not pain itself, but the separation between what was always meant to be whole? A Course in Miracles teaches that sin and separation are not real, but rather they are illusions stemming from a mistaken belief in a self separate from God. It defines sin as an error in thinking or an insane idea that separation occurred rather than a reality that warrants punishment. When you consider sin from the lens of punishment, it is treated as an impossible, irreversible act that leads us to a fearful attraction to guilt and punishment. But if you consider sin from the lens of an error that can be corrected, you essentially experience it as only the absence of love. What if sacred sensuality, sexuality, and spirituality were never meant to be in conflict with one another? What if the fracture between them is actually the distortion and not the design? Because from the lens of love consciousness and emotional engineering, I don't see these as separate. I see them as a divine trinity within the human experience. It's not, I don't mean indulgence. I'm not talking about shame or confusion, but I'm talking about connection, creation, and embodiment. We've been taught about the Trinity or the divine blueprint that is God, the Father, Yahweh, the Son, that is divine love in human form or the human experience, and the Holy Spirit, the breath, the presence, and the indwelling. But what if that pattern was never just about something to worship externally? What if the pattern was something to recognize internally? Because when I look at myself as a spiritual being having a human experience, I see reflections of that same divine architecture: spiritual, sexual, sensual. Not random, not accidental, but the blueprint. Spirituality connects us to source. Sexuality reminds us that we carry this creative power within us. And sensuality teaches us how to feel that power within the presence, in the moment. And when these three are aligned, we are no longer fragmented. We are embodied. So let's talk about the wound of separation that creates distortion. Because many of us were taught that to be spiritual, we must disconnect from our bodies. That holiness meant suppression, that purity meant disconnection, and that desire was dangerous, and that feeling deeply was a weakness in us. And what do we do with that? We split ourselves. We honor the mind while trying to elevate the spirit to only end up abandoning the body. But hear me when I say this, and hear me clearly. You cannot neglect or reject the body and expect to feel whole. I talk to my clients through emotional engineering that your emotions live in your body because your nervous system holds your safety, your capacity for intimacy, your availability or ability to receive love, and your ability to surrender. All of that lives inside our bodies. And when the body becomes unsafe, everything sacred begins to feel unsafe. God, love, and even stillness. Because when is the last time you sat with yourself? What many people call discipline is actually disconnection. Purity is actually suppression, and control is actually fear. And fear can be as loud as a megaphone that is being blown right directly behind you. So, in truth, sacred sensuality has been widely misunderstood because people confuse sensuality with performance. But I share with my clients all the time that sacred sensuality is not about being seen, it's about being felt. To feel your breath, to feel your body, your emotions, and feel the present moment without rushing to escape it. Sensuality is the art of being fully alive in your body. And if the Holy Spirit is the breath, movement, and presence, then sacred sensuality is one of the ways we experience that presence within us. In the exhale, in the inhale, in the warmth of your skin, in the stillness of your awareness, and through love consciousness. Because what I can feel with truth, I can hold with reverence. And what I can hold with reverence, I no longer have to carry shame. Now, let's get into the real reason why you stayed. Sexuality. Sacred sexuality, to be exact. Because this is where the distortion gets super loud. Sexuality has been reduced to performance, to appetite, to validation. But that's not its origin. Sexuality is actually the creative force of life generating energy. It is a power to create life, to bond it, to merge it, to express it, and then to transform it. And as God is creator, and we are made in the image of divine intelligence, then how could our creative life force be separate from the sacred? It can't be. It can be distorted, sure, but it's not inherently impure. And here's another truth bomb. Sexuality without consciousness can consume, whereas sexuality with consciousness can consecrate. When sexuality is disconnected from emotional integrity, it becomes chaotic. It invokes the struggle love paradigm. But when it's aligned with truth, safety, and awareness, it becomes sacred, and it becomes the manifestation of an expression of divine creation moving through us. You become the embodiment of love. This is where I've tapped into in my own healing journey and developed emotional engineering. Because, we can't talk about sacred embodiment without talking about regulation. So if your nervous system is dysregulated, you will fear intimacy, you'll fear pleasure, you will fear stillness, you will fear depth and surrendering. Not because they are unsafe, but because our bodies have learned to associate them with risk. So healing is not just spiritual, it's physiological, emotional, and embodied work. Healing teaches us how to sit in our own body without needing to escape it, how to feel without shutting down or performing, and how to hold energy without leaking it through validation, over giving, over sharing, or avoidance. This is emotional engineering, and emotional engineering is a sacred recalibration of your inner world so that truth can move through you without distortion. Because here's the reality. Spirituality without embodiment becomes bypassing. It becomes a language without transformation. It becomes devotion without honesty. It becomes prayer without presence. And love consciousness isn't asking you to escape yourself. It asks you to return to yourself fully and wholly. Even the parts you were taught to hide, the parts you were taught was too much, even the parts that carry sensation, desire, emotion, depth, and death, because those parts are not separate from God. They're waiting to be met by the God within you. So when I look at this, I see the Divine Trinity not outside of us, but within us. Spirituality, sexuality, sensuality, connection, creation, embodiment. God as source, Yahweh as divine love, and the Holy Spirit as living presence. And within you, that same pattern exists. This is what I like to believe when Yahweh said not to worship him, but to worship his Father in heaven. He said to follow him. As we follow his teachings and connect to the God within, we follow the Christ consciousness that is within us, not to be rejected, not to be feared, and only to be integrated. Because the goal is not indulgence. The goal is alignment. The goal is not shame. The goal is sanctification through truth. And the goal is not separation from the body, but reverence within the body. So no, you don't become more holy by abandoning yourself. You become whole by returning to yourself with truth, with awareness, and with love. Because healing is not becoming less human to become more divine. Healing is allowing the divine to fully inhabit your humanity. And as always, I will see you soon. Oh, don't forget to like, share, and comment. See you soon.